Hey everybody, this is Rudy for Best Investor. As most of you know, yesterday I had a call with Occidental Petroleum Investor Relations, and I had a chance to ask some questions and get some answers, including many of your questions and answers, and or answers to them. And I'm going to share that with you in a minute. What I did want to tell you though is that the folks at Occidental Petroleum Investor Relations actually read your comments, and they specifically made mention of the fact that this channel has some robust interaction amongst the retail investors of Occidental Petroleum stock, and they actually do pay attention to what you say on this channel. So it's kind of cool to know. Anyway, I put everything together in a short PowerPoint presentation. So let me see if I can figure out how to do that. Then I can share it with you. So let's go here and go from the beginning. And let me put myself up there in a little corner and minimize myself and get myself out of the way so we can get going on this. So the first thing we talked about was the recent video that I published on Occidental's third quarter results, which included a very robust and detailed cash flow analysis or summary thereof, done by Rob Smith from Whangarei, New Zealand. Once again, thanks for that, Rob, and you'll be pleased to know that the bean counters at Occidental Petroleum very diligently looked at your cash flow analysis. They made a couple of comments to me, and they said that the cash flow from operations before working capital, interest, preferred dividends, etc., should be part of the P&L, and that is how they had arrived at their free cash flow number that they had shared with us for the third quarter. By the way, if I'm glancing down, I'm just looking at my notes here because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything that I should possibly share with you as I chat through this presentation. So once again, firstly, thanks for doing that, Rob. And secondly, as I said, you'll be pleased to know that the folks at Occidental Petroleum also looked at your cash flow analysis. Nice job. A couple of macro themes. So Wesley posed the question and said, shouldn't Occidental and Anadarko be greater than the sum total of the parts? If I can put some words into Wesley's mouth for him. The answer to that is probably yes. Regrettably, you're going to have some type of a long-term view on that, because the combination of assets are really good assets, but it's going to take a substantial amount of time, several years, before we actually, as shareholders, drive good value from those assets that were acquired in the Anadarko acquisition about a year ago. Matthias made a couple of interesting comments here. The first one is COVID, and the second one is Biden. So on COVID specifically, it's an interesting macro theme because no one can predict exactly what will happen there. What we've been seeing over the last few months for sure is a rising infection rate, but a very, very significantly lower mortality rate, based on a number of variety of different factors, I guess, better treatment for patients, people being more aware, taking more care, etc. But yes, Matthias, you're quite right. If we have another sort of lockdown or an extended lockdown related to the coronavirus, then this is not going to be good. It's not going to be good in general. It's not going to be good for people. It's not going to be good for business. And of course, it's not going to be good for oil and gas and energy companies either. We definitely do not want to see prices for oil tank again and crash like it did in April. Regarding Biden, Vicky very recently was on television talking about the incoming administration change. She also talked about that in the Q3 earnings results call, and they made mention of the fact that Occidental, as a 100-year-old company, has had to work with a variety of different administrations. They have challenging environments around the world that they work with, including the Middle East and Africa. And they quite adept at collaborating with administrations as they come and go. So she doesn't see too much of a challenge in that regard, but it's something for us to obviously pay attention to and be aware of. Many people asked questions about dividends. So I also originally invested in Occidental because I like the dividend yield. So a few people that I highlighted here, Yiddy and Daniel and Turbocharged Dude and W, all said like, hey, Mr. Oxy, when are we getting dividends again? So, I did pose the question. So in the first place, I should say that from a personal point of view, I'm only interested in getting the dividend or receiving the dividend if Occidental has enough free cash flow generation and has serviced its debt and shows that it can easily service the interest on that debt, and is able to provide a sustainable dividend, then I am interested in receiving it again. Until then, no. Well, the folks at Occidental Investor Relations also agree with that. They talked about the debt repayments, the free cash flow. They're looking at 3 times leverage or below before they would even consider reinstating it. Obviously, the cash flow, we know that the break-even point sort of in the high 30s. They're looking at oil $40 a barrel or greater. And then the guidance at $2.9 billion in order to stay flat. So they need to manage that as well before we can look at even reinstating dividends. So my timeline there would be a couple of years, maybe 2 to 3 years. Occidental Low Carbon Ventures gets a lot of attention, not only from us as investors, but also in the media in general. Not enough from the media in general, you could probably argue at this point, but Alexei from Russia commented on Oxy Low Carbon Ventures. I have this references here to the so-called green alternative energies like solar and wind, clean energy, low carbon news, etc. From Mr. Investalot and Hans Intact, respectively. So a couple of points there. So during the conference call, the Q3 conference call, Vicky made mention of the fact that the European energy companies are focused on renewables like solar and wind, whereas Oxy is more focused on carbon capture. So from a strategic point of view, that's what Occidental will be focused on for the next decade or so. And that's sort of the timeline attached to Oxy Low Carbon Ventures anyway, in terms of where we are today. However, in terms of news on that front, Yidi Zhang shared with me a PDF which Occidental released just yesterday, I believe, called Pathway to Net Zero. And of course, during the conference call, Vicky made mention of the fact that Occidental is looking to achieve net zero by 2040, which is quite an aggressive target. I also saw this today from the Houston Chronicle, Occidental to shift into carbon management company. So this is December 2nd, 2020. So it's brand new, hot off the press, Occidental kind of repositioning themselves as a carbon management company as opposed to a traditional oil and gas company in the true sense as it was for the past 100 years. Vince sent me a nice long comment here, and I'm not sure if it was a comment or an email, Vince, but either way, Vince talked a little bit about Oxy Low Carbon Ventures as well, but he also highlighted the recent UBS analyst downgrade on Occidental. I'm going to come back to that one in a minute. And then we talked a little bit about Cramer. So Vince and I have been sharing notes on Cramer and Mad Money and the TV clown for a little while, just chatting about Cramer in general. I think Vince's macro thesis, if I can put words in your mouth there, Vince, if you forgive me, is that Occidental should do more promotion and get in front of the TV cameras more to tell their story because they have a good story. We talked a little bit about TV and Jim Cramer, even specifically investor relations and myself. And the folks from Occidental said they like to have discussions that include measured steps, and reminded me that institutional investors do not look at mad money in order to make decisions. They want to have meaningful discussions with serious journalists, not people who use sound effects to make their point. That's not what they said, that's what I'm saying. But they also told me that Vicky is very active, speaking to people that actually sort of have some standing in the energy sector in general, and people that other people listen to within the energy sector. And they highlighted Daniel Jurgen to me, and a recent interview that Vicky did with Daniel, which is about 30 minutes long. I will post a link to this video in the comments, and also for the CBC interview that I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, where Vicky talked about the incoming Biden administration. So Yeah, they are getting in front of the TV cameras from time to time. And Vince, specific to your comment, they like to speak to serious journalists. They mentioned a couple of them by name. I'm not going to go there and sort of lend credence to it, but they like to people who they can have a serious discussion with on TV if Vicky were to be put in front of the TV camera speaking to journalists. The UBS downgrade is the other thing that Vince mentioned. So the analyst, you know, by now, analyst, Lloyd Byrne from UBS downgraded Occidental and at the same time raised the price target. Now, in his defense, he raised the price target from $10 to $12, but it's quite extraordinary to downgrade a stock and raise the price target in the same downgrade paper. He makes mention of the fact that Oxy's shares are up 68% in the last month. And then he says his thesis is, in his downgrade note, Lloyd says that the company's debt concerns have been mitigated. Well, that's good news, right? But the recent rally has carried the stock too far, too fast. And because the stock went too far, too fast, he downgraded the stock and said you should sell Occidental and raised his target from $10 to $12. The most recent analyst ratings that we have were in, other than Lloyd Burns, was in November. We had a couple. Susquehanna upgraded Oxy from neutral to positive with a target of $18, and Morgan Stanley maintained and said equal weight. Girl Power asked about further restructuring charges. This is a tough one. Girl Power _ Sunset. The reason why it's tough is because it's not a good market to shop for energy assets, or maybe the other way around. It's a good market to shop if you want to buy, but not a good time to sell because prices are depressed for the assets in general. Obviously, there's not been a recovery from that point of view yet. But all the assets are for sale if a fair price for the assets can be achieved, and if impairment charges are required in order to write down some of those assets, then that would happen. So it's a little bit unpredictable. Some of the assets that they managed to divest, like the Mozambique assets, they mentioned were a cash drain anyway. I think that was acquired by Total. The recent asset sale of the Colombian assets, we expect the cash from that to hit the books in Q4, so that cash inflow should happen any day. If it's not happened already, we wouldn't know because they can't tell us, because we're in the last month of the fourth quarter and they're not allowed to share any information that's not public. And then Mike asked the question, what would Oxy's EPS or earnings per share be if oil averaged $50? The answer to that is, who knows, Mike? And in addition to that, obviously Occidental does discounted cash flow analyses, but they're not public information either, because included in a DCF, you're going to share some information that you shouldn't be sharing. So we can't get insight into that. But I'd have a guess and say, Mike, in answer to your question, if WTI averages $50, Occidental's printing money. So that'd be a good place for Occidental to be. Vince also asked me a couple of questions about Wes. You know, he said, is Wes out of Occidental completely and have they divested out of their West investment? And, you know, the folks at Investor Relations reminded me that on page 34 of their slide deck from the Q3 earnings, they actually addressed this specific topic and made mention of the fact that Occidental is still 51% invested in the LP unit and 2% in the GP unit. And they referred me to page 34, which is this little insert I added at the bottom here so that you can see that is what they were talking about. So 2% of West operating for non-voting shares, and then the LP and GP unit shareholding, as I just mentioned. So yeah, Occidental is still very much invested in West. Some people commented, and I asked the question anyway because I wanted to know why are the insiders not buying Occidental at this price? And once again, they referred me to the pitch deck from Q3. This time it was on slide number 32, if you want to follow along or if you want to look it up. They said, you know, if you look at Vicky's compensation, so she's the CEO, but this same type of compensation mix applies to senior executives and even some middle managers and up. They receive RSUs. RSUs is restricted share units. And then if you look at the salary component or the potential annual cash incentive, what you have is a breakdown where only 25% of it is cash and 75% is stock awards. And in fact, 90% of Vicky's compensation is variable or at risk. When you issue restricted share units, you can also, instead of calling them RSUs, you can call them PSUs, which are performance share units, which really these are, because you can link the performance share units to a whole variety of different factors. So you can say it's related or linked to earnings per share, to the company's revenue, to the tenure of the executive in order to retain them. So there's a whole variety of different performance metrics that you can attach to shares as part of compensation. And it's just interesting to note, and probably my oversight not paying attention to this, but it's on slide number 32 of the pitch deck for the Q3 earnings. But Vicky's compensation is 90% variable or at risk. I did take a quick look at the Fed graph for WTI. I just wanted to kind of see what it looked like as a picture. And there's the sort of proverbial V-shaped recovery that many of the people are talking about. We obviously saw this huge dip on WTI in April of 2020, where it went right down to 16.55. But if you look at the sort of leveling out year at around $40, we've been fairly consistent there now at around $40 for almost 6 months. If Oxy can maintain the number of barrels of oil equivalent per day in terms of production and the free cash flow that they generate from the different business units, with WTI above $40 and trending a little higher, this is all good news. So, guys, I think that sort of covers everything I wanted to share with you. Let me know in the comments if I might have missed something, or if there's something else that you wanted to discuss that I should pay attention to. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it up here and remind you, if you like these videos and you haven't subscribed yet, to hit the subscribe button. I won't overload you. Sometimes I go away for a week and then I come back and do 2 or 3 quick videos in 1 week. But if you can subscribe, that'd be great. And until I see you guys again, I will connect with you in the comments and we can chat there. Stay safe, take care, and I look forward to reading your comments and hearing what your thoughts are in terms of Occidental. So on that note, thank you for watching, and take care, stay safe, and I will speak to you soon. Bye-bye.